Hey folks, Shelby here from Village Earthright, and yeah, just got a new machine and figured I'd give a little bit of an overview review kind of deal because I'm sure there's lots of people like me who just like to get as much information about all the excavators that are out there as they possibly can while they make decisions because we live in the information age and there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of choices to be made. And I do a lot of research before I make a purchase. I've never really thought I've ever made a perfect purchase, but I'm generally pretty happy with what I get. And this is another machine that I'm pretty happy with. So just to sort of go over a few things about, I looked at Kubotas, Yanmars, Doosan's, Mechalaks, Bobcats. Hyundai. The Hyundai was a nice machine. The 60. So the Volvo 60 and the Hyundai 60 basically identical in a lot of ways, but not really because the Hyundai 60 is still pilot controlled, whereas the Volvo 60 is electric over hydraulic. I mean, they're both full tail swing machines. They both weigh about the same. They both have a very similar horsepower, except you can put the Hyundai in a boost mode, so it gets a little bit more power. So anyways, the point of this is just, I looked at a lot of machines before I made this purchase, talked to a bunch of dealers. John Deere, I looked at John Deere's. Fine machines, just, I don't quite know how they justify the price they were giving me, but, I'm sure they're a good machine. The cab was a little smaller on it. I looked at a 50. That's what they had in the yard. And the cab was it was just too small for me. This is just such a nice big cab. I mean, the Kubota 57 is also a big cab. Definitely, jumping up to a 60 in general, you do get a bigger cab. But this is a almost zero tail swing. I mean, it's a tiny tail swing, and it's about 8 inches less than the Kubota, which is not it's not a ton, but it definitely makes a difference. In fact, I think it might be almost a foot. I'd have to go, look at specs, but you guys can find that information. That's all online. So, being in a reduced or almost zero tail swing package, it's definitely one of the bigger cabs. Like the cab on a lot of the other, like the Yanmar, for instance, was too small for me. So, yeah, that's basically the gist of it. And then I'll go over some details. Well, just because it's honestly the simplest thing to start with, I'm going to start here at the end of the working arm here, because there's really not a whole lot to say. A lot of machines are all pretty similar. But it's got the greasable pins, which is not every machine, but most. It does have not cast. It has actual steel dog bones, which means that, for instance, like when I had to weld little studs for those on there, it's normal steel. In this case, the Engcon installer put the hose routing this way, which, he could have welded hose keepers here and run it this way, but actually, after thinking about doing that myself in relation to this, the hose would have had to come up through here, and so that just doesn't work. So actually, I think this is probably, I almost changed it, but I think it's probably the best situation for right now. I'm not going to really say a whole lot about the Engcon. This is not really a review of the Engcon. There's lots of that out there. But this is a new version that's not been out that long, so I'll say a few things. This is a 206 for the 6-ton machine, and they definitely improved the guards. It's now a solid guard. That's nice. This is a detachable one, pretty straightforward. It's just this little thing right here that you just put a wrench on. It does both the attachment pins and the hydraulics, so that's nifty. This model, I happen to get it. It's an option. You can get tilt and rotation sensors, which are, you can see that wiring. So I get my finger out of there, right, coming in here. The iDig that I run doesn't use the tilt sensor, but it does use the rotation sensor, and obviously that was a big part of my upgrade. The previous one I had did not have greasable pins, but this one actually does, and nobody said anything about it when I was, you know, asking them. So I ended up adding, this is something the Volvo came native with greasable pins. So I added this grease fitting here and the guarding. Ignore my shitty welds on these guards, they're really annoying to weld. And then I added one, get the lighting is kind of shit here, but one on there. Which, you know, it's one of these things where I almost prefer that, even though I had to add it over the greasable pin, just because of having that wire, that hose out here is less than ideal. So, yeah, you know, I've got the iDig, which is, you know, once again, I mean, I could say something about that, but there's other, you can watch other videos if you really want to know about the iDig. This has the double auxiliary hydraulics here, which I didn't need because I'm running the Engcon, which only runs through the main auxiliary, but it's what they had in the yard. Not a bad thing to have if I ever wanted to run like a dangle rotating grapple, or something like that for doing sort of more forestry applications. Then I could just have the two auxiliaries. So there's nothing wrong with it being there. It's just, I didn't need it. The hose routing up here is a little bit awkward. It kind of moves a lot just through that loop. The way that the Kubota did it, which unfortunately I just sold, so I can't really show it to directly compare for you folks, but yeah, it just felt like it moved more. This is already, I don't know if you can kind of see, there's some scuff marks on the paint right there, a little hard to see, but just from those hoses moving back and forth. So that's just, you know, from a visual perspective, a little silly. Going back along the arm, nothing really major to say from a review standpoint. It's all pretty good. We can sort of look at the piping here. You know, nice solid piping, nice flat. It's within the bounds of the boom for the most part, except for basically that electric line is from the Engcon. So that's, you know, that's a nice feature. I think, you know, Kubota and a bunch of other brands, I'm mostly going to compare to Kubota, that's what I know the best. They run the auxiliaries up along the side of the boom. I don't actually have a problem with that. I think it's fine. If you're hitting lines and smashing them on the side of your boom, you probably got bigger problems than that. So, you know, getting down to the blade, that's obviously another thing that's different, you know, between machines is how they design it. Not a big fan of this blade design. It sticks out a little bit further than I really wish it did. When I tilt this blade, it's still got 9 inches or 8 inches to the tracks, and I think it just doesn't have as much lift as my old normal blade did, and since I've got an Engcon, I don't really need this angle blade, so I'm sure many people will find it useful, but to me it's just something that's kind of a nuisance. You know, they tried to do this protecting along these hoses, so they got this guard up here, but I'm just looking at this and being like, yeah, some rock comes flopping over there, that is gonna get broken. You know, because I dig in a lot of rocks, and it's inevitable that at least one rock is gonna come rolling up over that thing. And so I thought about trying to figure out some way to add protection, and I just there's a reason they did it the way they did. If you tilt this thing all the way, this comes to here, and so I can't really, without adding kind of something underneath, and maybe someday, but yeah, you know, some more hose routing stuff along here. Nothing much to say. Oh, one thing I just wanted to point out, just because it was something that kind of surprised me, this is how they put the pins in, and I'm sure it's fine. It just looks cheap, you know, it just looks silly. I don't know if a bolt's really better, but it certainly would look better to me, and maybe I'll switch it. But you know, if you get something like a Takeuchi or something where they actually have a nut that tightens it all together, I mean, that's a really sweet setup. But also, they're like the only ones who do that, so maybe there's a reason it's not necessary. I mean, my other machine had 2,000 hours on it, and none of these joints right here had any play at all, because I had the auto greasing, or if you were just somebody who greased it regularly, that would also be the case. Speaking of auto grease, there it is. That's how I've mounted it. It's kind of nice. You can see the face of it from the cab. pretty good mounting. You know, that's steel there, so it's pretty solid. I used thicker plate this time so it doesn't wobble at all. The previous mount that I did had a little bit of wobble in it. Oh, one thing to say while I'm out here on the arm that's really great about Volvo is their whole hose routing system. They've got all these extra holes, as you can see, like that one there. And if we go up the boom, you know, you'll see more and more. And so it gave me places to run, right? So there's a grease line running through that hole there. And see if I can clamber my way up to show you guys more of the hose routing situation. So yeah, so that's a nice feature for sure. Well, just because everybody always talks about, yes, it did LED lights. I mean, they're pretty much standard at this point. I can't imagine anybody not doing them. Let's see, let's go under the so, you know, moving down here, looking at the undercarriage, pretty good, you know, easy to change the sprocket, pretty self-cleaning. This one has that hole, I guess they call it the X-frame, so the dirt can actually fall through here. So definitely going to be a lot easier to keep it clean, which I look forward to because I like to keep my tracks clean when I can, but you can never keep them 100% clean. Sometimes you're just in the mud. Obviously, one of the reasons that I chose this machine, because there's really, all these excavators, they're all pretty good. I like the way it looks. I think it's a sharp, as Ollie would say. It's a nice bit of kit. These lines are a little silly. Like, for instance, I'm just going to point this out. This lump, there's nothing under that. That is pure aesthetic, and I actually think it's really silly. But whatever, you know, the engineers, the designers, they're in their CAD programs, they're doing what they want to do. More power to them, I guess. So yeah, getting into some more of the mechanics of this machine. Another reason that I chose this, I'm actually going to walk around to this side first, is I really like how it's built around the cab. The accessibility of things, I mean, obviously everybody's talking, and so everybody is so much better about maintenance now. Oil filter accessibility, fuel filter accessibility, hose routing. I mean, you know, you watch any of the ads for, you know, on YouTube that these companies make, and they're all talking about their labeled hoses. Labeled hoses, great, you know. But the side engine design of this, somehow it just makes sense. It really, I feel like, I mean, especially compared to my old 040 Kubota, so much easier to get at everything. I mean, just look at the ability to get your hands in around this engine without having to lift the cab, lift whatever. I did check at the 57, definitely was not as accessible. It was good. It was, you know, obviously you go bigger, you get more room. That's just standard. Really nice, you know, I mean, this is another thing. I mean, I've run a bunch of machines where, like, getting at the oil water separator, I can get my hand on that, crank that open, drip some water, you know, I've got room to put a catch bowl. Just little things like that, that definitely make a big difference. Obviously, batteries right there, easy to clean the rads. Here's the electrical shutoff on this machine. I've seen them sometimes some people put them in the cab. I kind of like that. That would be nice, but you know, that's fine. You know, nothing wrong with that. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, going to the back again here. We got our maintenance, we got air filter. This is a cool feature that's a pretty Volvo specific feature, is the pre-filter. It's just pilot and auxiliary that goes through here. The primary system comes back right here. And there's another filter in there as well. So you can see your oil. You can see if it's cloudy. You can see if there's bits in it. It's easy to change this filter. Kind of cool. You know, were people ruining machines before this happened? not necessarily. But nothing wrong with some innovation, especially if it doesn't hurt anything. So, you know, something like that's nice, except the weird thing is, instead of filling through here, you fill through this. You have to unscrew this and pour in here, and then you have to let it settle to the bottom of the tank. So it is a little slow to add oil, which can be frustrating. I mean, obviously it's super well laid out in here. Really easy to get at hoses. This panel also here comes off, 3 screws, pops right off. The whole thing's accessible. So yeah, just fantastically easy to work on. But hopefully I won't have to really do much work on it now that I'm done modifying. You know, I added my own auto grease, which I had to wire under there. I put the iDig on myself. I did a bunch of modifications to the wiring and the hose routing for the Engcon after I got that back, because there's just ways that I like it that other people don't do it. So yeah, I think that pretty much concludes the outside of this machine. So I'm going to talk about the inside of the cab, but actually before I jump in here, I just going to show you this one thing here, which, you know, it's just a nice feature. Great toolbox, tons of room. I've got full kits here, grease gun, and I've actually got a wrench kit I'm also going to throw in there. So, you know, yeah, if I don't have my service truck with me at the time, I'm going to have quite a few tools with me. And there is a plug over here for a glow plug if you wanted to plug your thing in the winter time. So for heating in the winter, starting in the winter, no problems. Starting into the cab here, before I jump in, we've got fuse panel. I guess I don't really need to open that, it's a fuse panel. Indoor air cabin filter is right there, super easy to get at. I mean, just, I don't know, if anybody who's watched a lot of these videos, you'll just see. I mean, those pedals are full-size pedals. It's just, this is basically a full-size excavator cab. So, getting in the cab, I mean, I'm just going to tell you, I'm 6'2", but I've only got a 32 inseam. I don't have super long legs, but I'm a tall guy, obviously, and it's a pretty comfortable cab. You know, I got good arm position. These armrests, they're kind of cheap. They cheaped out on them. The ones on the 60, so much nicer. I tried putting some cushions on them because I really honestly just wanted them to be a little bit taller, and the shape of this, I just couldn't figure out a way to add anything to it, so I'm living with them. And now with the Engcon controllers, you know, with this here and this here, it's not as big a deal as when it was the standard Volvo controllers. Other things to kind of go around, like layout wise, I mean, just storage. You've got places to put shit there, you got places to put stuff there. I put my iDig computer when I'm not using it, I put it, the tablet goes in there. You got a big old box here. There's obviously the manuals are behind the seat. One thing I'm going to point out though is that this thing did not have what I would call a cup holder, which, I don't know, come on Volvo, like, that's like everybody says this over and over and over again. I mean, when are these manufacturers going to learn? All we want is a freaking cup holder. So I bought a plastic cup holder and I hung it right here, and it bangs around. I probably should just screw it to the plastic or something like that. But, you know, I mean, it's a perfect place for a cup holder. So, come on, Volvo. Put a freaking cup holder in things. But otherwise, I mean, it's great. You know, you got your plans, you got your tools, you got your tape measures. So, really, it's great having a lot of storage. One of the things I'm going to say, so this has the angle blade. And here, let me get this machine started up here. And so got the machine started up, and one thing just starting it up I really realized I should point out, because of the computer system in here, it takes an annoyingly long time to get started. I mean, it's still only like 10 seconds, but you don't just crank it and go. You got to turn the key halfway and then crank it. If you go too fast, it won't start. I don't know, just silly. And then you gotta wait for this screen to fully turn on, get everything going before you can throttle it up. And yeah, you know, if you're working all day, obviously it's not a problem. But if you're somebody like me who's hopping in and out of the machine all the time, it's just, come on, like, why does it take so long for a mini excavator to start up? Just the modern era. So going into sort of the controls, looking at the blade control, right? It's got the angle blade here, and on the Kubota, this is definitely something Kubota got way better. They're kind of famous for their angle blade, and they're the only ones that I know of with a 6-way. Is that they actually have on the top of here, they have a proportional electronic control so that you can go up and down and side to side. You don't have to, but in this case, you have to hit a button and then it changes the hydraulics, and then you can angle the blade. So yeah, you can only do one at a time. You got to remember you got to hit the button. You got to go back and forth instead of side to side, so it's harder to remember which direction you're going. Just unfortunate, but you know, like I said, I mean, there's ways that they did things like the engine bay. I mean, there's things they did great, and there's places they cut some corners, and that's just the nature of the business. This does have the old quick hitch button, totally defunct. I just use the Engcon quick hitch system. Another thing, because of the whole, it's all electronic and computerized, the blade float is electronic. And of course, I think I saw one of their videos, they were talking about how, oh, by having it be electronic means that when you have to activate it, then you hit the button, then the blade can float, and then you can lift it, and it's still floating, and that's an advantage. I think that's bullshit. I would rather be able to slam it forward, float it, pull it back to what I'm doing. I don't want to have to remember to undo float. But once again, it's one of those things that I chose to compromise on that for the other aspects of this machine, especially since I go with tilt rotators, so my use of the blade is less than somebody else might be using it. Overall, the whole, you know, the control panel's nicely laid out. You got, you know, your basic functions here. You've got actual jog dial, you know, things, actual controls for the AC system. You've still got a normal radio, Bluetooth, turns straight to your Bluetooth. It functions exactly like a Bluetooth radio to function. There's one thing, there's a lot of modern machines, you know, Cat, I think, is kind of famous for this, and in some of their newer machines, and a few other brands, but they just put everything in this. Hyundai, actually, I think they do this too. Put everything here, and then you're just, I don't know, man. I like buttons. You know, if it's something that I don't, you know, that I want to do somewhat regularly, I want to hit a real button. I want to, you know, I want to reach over and just blindly do this, do this, do this, do this. You know, it's like I don't want to have to look at a screen. So yeah, this does have that system. I'm not going to show it. People have seen it. This window can lock into the upper window, and then you can lift them both at the same time. I eliminated that feature in mine somewhat inadvertently because I added this, which now I can't lift that window up. So this is where I put my mount when I'm taking videos. Obviously, when the windshield's down, so that means I can't do that with this, but I never lift that up. I mean, and this cab is big enough, I'm comfortable, I don't need to stick my feet out there. So yeah, I think that that just about covers the majority of this machine. Just gonna go over a few more other things just to talk about. Don't really have any footage yet of it moving. The machine is definitely slower than the Kubotas, and the joysticks are a little stiffer, but it's smoother, it's more controlled. I feel more like I have the ability to really do detailed work with it, and I really love a fast machine, but I also really, I do so much finish work, detail grading, that kind of stuff, that I think I'm gonna really benefit. Like, this thing is little, so it's not, so I have a Mechalak, a 10 MCR, the 10-ton Mechalak, and this thing's still faster than that. I did try the 6 MCR Mechalak. That thing was faster than the 10, probably pretty comparable to this. I mean, Kubota, maybe the Deers are similar. I haven't really tried them that much. They're supposedly famously fast. The Kubotas, to me, are fast. I mean, they're fantastic mini excavators. Lots to love there. But this thing is, yeah, so it's a little bit slower. It tracks a little bit slower. It just feels more like a full-size excavator to me, in the way that it's squat, it's stable, it's smooth, and it feels powerful. So, you know, it's everything. It's all compromised. That's the world. That's how the world is. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I'm missing. Good tie down points. Great service. Shout out to Tyler Equipment, Tony there. He's been great. And yeah, so I mean, and that was of course another choice of mine. I mean, not the people at the Kubota dealership, they were fine, they were good. They served me well, but they were further away from me, which, you know, when you're talking about heavy equipment or really just about anything, distance to your dealership and all that is important to keep in mind. So yeah, they've been this thing had like a few super tiny tweaks. They reshimmed one pin on it, and they redid the fuel water separator because it just wasn't quite sealing, so they just put a brand new one in for me. So kudos to them. Yep, I think that about does it. If you guys have any other questions or something like that, and you want me to make a video on, you know, on my Engcon setup or my auto grease setup, obviously let me know in the comments and I can. But I figure for the most part you can always Google other people talking about that. So, bye.